Hello and welcome. Today I have the pleasure of sharing a fascinating conversation I had with Professor Paul Dolan, who's maybe better known as the Professor of Happiness. Paul is a behavioural scientist, advisor to the government, and currently Professor of Behavioural Science at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He's published 41 peer-reviewed articles and been cited more than 32,000 times. Paul has certainly made the science of happiness his business. You may well have read one of his two best-selling books. The first is called Happiness by Design, and his most recently released book is called Happy Ever After, which is the focus of our conversation today. We chat about all the things related to happiness, not least how to make your retirement years as fulfilling as possible. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Professor Paul Dolan. Welcome to the Retirement Café podcast, Paul Dolan.
Hello, Justin. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you, Paul. Now, we're meeting on quite over the wonders of the internet on quite a warm late late summer Thursday in the UK, and you're looking pretty hot.
Well, that's a nice start. I like that. It is actually really hot. I really don't thrive very well at these sorts of temperatures, so that's my excuse if I'm really boring and awful.
Now, Paul, you're the author of many books, and you're kind of known as the happiness professor. How did you get that title?
So very good. I don't know, when Happiness by Design was doing the rounds and was in the press and whatever. I guess that was when that came about. It's a real burden, Justin, because people ask me all the time whether I'm happy, and I wasn't until you asked me. And then also, of course, what makes me happy. So it is, it does feel like a bit of a pressure, but it's also great as well, because the main thing is that with Happiness by Design in particular, and then Happy Ever After thereafter, to kind of try to reach audiences that academics typically don't get to. And I think that's kind of one of my main ambitions, and that seems to have worked out pretty well with being called the Happiness Prof.
Yeah. So, Paul, there's a huge amount of questions I've got. Now, obviously, our audience, or my audience, is people approaching retirement, thinking about retirement. They're working out whether they've got enough money to retire, whether they want to retire, whether they're desperate to retire. They're unhappy maybe in their career choices or how it's unfolded for themselves. And I know that you're recently turned 55, and of course that's a key age, as we know, for accessing pensions, etc. What's your view of retirement?
Yeah, well, I know. I was 55 in May, and you get that reminder that you can that you're old. Really, that was was the first thing. Actually, just worth saying something quickly about happiness and age, because it's probably the most robust finding that we have across happiness research. And you find this in data sets pretty much everywhere around the world, is that the age happiness function is U-shaped. That is, people are happier when they're younger and when they're older, and it declines through to middle age and starts to increase again from about 50-ish, 52, whatever. So you and I are both on the upward part of happiness. It's one of the things that I enjoy telling my students, although they might be younger and think they're happier, they've got the downturn to come. So we do generally get happier as we get through our 50s and into our 60s and 70s. Of course, those last few months of life are not particularly happy, but we're kind of happy on the way towards there. What was your question?
Excuse me. What as you turn 55 and you're kind of thinking about maybe the next 20 odd years, etc., and possibly there is the word retirement in there. It may not even be part of your vocabulary, but what is your own personal kind of view of these future years?
Yeah, no, well, thank you for asking me that. Well, see, personally, I've always felt incredibly lucky. Because I do a job that, by and large, of course, there's aspects of it like marking that are awful, but by and large, the research is kind of what I choose to research, things I find interesting, and largely working with people that I like to collaborate with. So um, retirement would be probably just doing that, but maybe not as much. So it kind of would be quite a sort of, I hope, seamless transition into working less and caring less about the metrics that institutions like LSE care about, I think. But fundamentally, not changing that much. And I think what I want to draw attention to, because not everyone is in this position, and not everyone's lucky enough to be working in jobs that they enjoy, is that whatever the transition into retirement looks like, is to have activities that you find both pleasurable and purposeful. The subtitle to Happiness by Design is finding pleasure and purpose in everyday life, and I think that it's not for me to prescribe what you get pleasure from and what you get purpose from, but I think it's for you to work out. But I do think happy lives are ones that contain a good balance between things that they find on the one hand fun, and other activities that they find fulfilling. And one of the key things in retirement, actually throughout life, is to ensure that you're getting that balance right for you. And I think often people will be thinking about the pleasure from retirement, but not thinking about how it might be purposeful. Because a lot of people obviously don't like their jobs, but insofar as people get any benefit from work other than financial, it comes from feeling like they're doing something worthwhile, that it has a point to it, it has some meaning, it has some purpose. And if you take that completely away, then your pleasure purpose function is going to be out of balance, as it were. So you kind of need to find activities that you will find purposeful.
Yeah. Oh, purposeful, and maybe I'll reframe that to me. The way I kind of view it is maybe meaningful. This is that the same concept?
It's pretty much the same thing. I think the thing. Yes, it is. I mean, that's the short and simple answer. You wouldn't expect an academic to give a short and simple answer, so I won't. But I think the distinction, whether you use meaning or purpose or fulfillment or worthwhileness, which is quite a nice word too, I think, is that it's located in the activities, in what you do, who you're with, not necessarily, and not even probably only in the narrative that you tell about how purposeful it is. I try to, both my books, try to kind of move us away from the storytelling. Stories are really important. They give us coherence and structure, but not to live our lives in stories. So I think the purpose or the meaning, whichever word we use, the most important thing about that is that it's in the experiences that you have, and not in the stories that you tell about those experiences.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I found great when listening to your book was this challenge around, family, having children, marriage. That it was like, oh, this is a different concept of my own. Obviously, generalizations and perceptions are already from my own experience, and kind of going, okay, well, this is actually pushing me in a different direction, which I found really stimulating. But of course, so as people enter into retirement, I see for the retirees that I work with, family is a significant part of that.
Yes.
And therefore, you're saying, there's a number of kind of fiscal policies that are there to support couples and marriage and etc. And you're saying, well, actually, there are lots of people who maybe choose not to have children or choose to have children. And I love the example where you were saying, the environmental cost of having a child comparable to the environmental cost of not having a child.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it's bad for the planet to have children. And then, of course, the other aspect of that I thought was beautiful, which was the or again really challenged me, which was this discussion point around, well, actually, if you're going to do something really worthwhile, adopt a child. And then so first of all those things were really challenging, and second of all, I was then kind of going, okay, so as people enter into retirement, do you imagine that family is more important at that point, as in, becoming a grandparent, becoming maybe this is just from your own personal viewpoint. I know that you've got, I think, teenagers currently.
Teenagers currently.
Yeah. So again, how do you view all this unfolding for yourself and for others?
Yeah, super question. So first of all, I really like the fact And it's really kind of, it's really exactly my ambition with what I do is to challenge you, and you're challenged in a good way. It's not like I'm kind of making you angry or pissed off, or then don't engage. It's a sort of little bit of discomfort that is kind of quite nice and healthy. And I think that's that. I really see that as really maybe even my main role actually, is to kind of provoke people in a good way. And it's actually not a provocation, really, is it, to say that actually no one size fits all, and different ways of living will be best suited to different people. I mean, the idea that that we should all get married, we should all have children, is kind of there will be significant effects of that, and but more importantly, to not be judgmental of those that choose alternative paths. I think that's like the fundamental thesis, really, of Happy Ever After, is just to chill out and let people get on with what works best for them. Yes. But it is important. But there are some universal truths, and it's not marriage, or it's not kids, but it is good relationships, right? I mean, that's all of us, irrespective of our personality types, benefit from close relationships. Even introverts like being around other people. They just like time away to recharge in a way that extroverts don't need. That's the fundamental difference, actually, between an introvert and an extrovert, is the time away from other people to recharge. So they are significant. Other people are significant for our own well-being in not just mental health terms, but physical health and in life expectancy. Loneliness, for example, will knock as many years off your life as smoking about 15, 20 cigarettes a day. It's like it's really harmful for the human condition to be lonely. So it really is important for people, I think. But what's interesting about the kids and grandkids is that a lot of people will think that, oh, that's okay, I'll have my kids to look after me when I get older, or I'll have grandkids or whatever. But you can't rely on them. I mean, they might move halfway around the world, right? Or live some distance away, and you might not see them anywhere near as often as you think you would. And I think that people without children are kind of obviously aware that they don't have that expectation. So often we'll have a better social network when they get older, because they're aware of the fact that the kids won't be there, because the kids aren't there at all.
Yeah. So, Paul, a couple of occasions, you touched on some financial issues, I think, regarding, the level of income that you need to be happy, and it kind of decreases once people get over a certain level of threshold of income. I mean, first of all, it is absolutely, really, really tough to be at the lower end of the income scales. People are really fighting for survival, but as their income starts to move up, and I think it possibly, I don't know whether this is your figures or figures I've read elsewhere, in the UK, this is 60 to 70 odd £1,000 worth of income coming in. More than that, people aren't getting exponentially happier. Though, of course, I always remember, I remember being, 16 and on a youth training scheme, a YTS in those days, on £27.30 a week, and I was living in rented accommodation, sharing a bedroom with a 75-year-old chap, and I was paying rent, half of my income away in rent, and with all honesty, it was pretty darn tough. Therefore, when I started to earn a few more pounds, then actually I did get, my quality of life did improve dramatically. And I think it's a really hard one, isn't it? Because if we continue pursue careers that pay us more money, or careers that we earn more wealth from, etc., to stop that acquisition, I find very much so with the people I'm working for, they've worked possibly very hard for long periods of their lives, and they've been acquiring and saving for that eventual date where they possibly retire, or even just that security policy. If they fall under the proverbial bus, they're leaving their family with some insurance, I suppose. In essence, there's some assets there to maintain their standard of living. They actually get to the point where they find it very difficult to spend anything.
Yes, it's such a that is a really interesting. I'm aware of that. I've had some conversations with people who are in a similar position to those that you just described. Just let me first of all emphasize the poverty makes people miserable point, because I think that's really significant. It can be a bit glib when academics say money doesn't make you happy, and that isn't true. I mean, money will make you happy if you don't have any. And I think I can't kind of emphasize that enough. But you're right. As you get into higher income levels, the returns to happiness become ever diminishing. But it is interesting, this inability to spend. And I think what happens in part, of course, it's going to be multiple explanations, but it is that it almost becomes part of your identity, your kind of asset size. It's sort of and to see your assets dwindle either through stock market variations or through spending is almost like to diminish your sense of self, because you get so invested, literally in every sense, invested in that pot. And it's an interesting question. We were talking about this yesterday with some students that I'm teaching on our executive masters at LSE, is that, so much of the policy prescriptions are around people being more future oriented. And for many people, that would be good, save more money for when you're older and so on, pensions. But actually, you want to equally get some significant number of people actually to consume more in the present. And that would also be good for economic growth too. So there is an interesting question about some people delaying gratification, kind of too far, and it becomes impossible for them to kind of enjoy the money that they thought that they would be spending when they got older.
Yeah. So we, one of our podcast guests, and someone I work with quite closely, is a chap called Rory Sutherland. You may know Rory.
I do know Rory very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know. So I was chatting to Rory about this, and Rory was saying that, the problem is with people of his age. He said we're useless for the economy because we've already bought all our sofas and we've bought all our cotton sheets and we've already bought our what have you, and we might replace our car every 10 years, but really, other than that, we're not actually contributing. We're just hoarding. We're just adding adding money to the bank account. So actually the 20, 30-year-old something is actually generating a lot of economic good, I suppose.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely right about that. I mean, we should be trying to, kind of encourage people of his age and my age. I think we're all about the same age to be spending more. For those of us that have those assets.
Now, one of the things that did made me kind of go, oh, I'm not sure I quite agree with your point on you in your book. You discussed about the passion that British people have with buying their own property. And of course, you discussed Maggie coming out with, let's all do the right to buy on a council house and et cetera, and this love affair that we've got with property. And you were questioning whether that is, in essence, the right thought process. Now, my initial reaction to that is, well, one of the real key points I always think about people buying their own property is that they don't have to pay rent in their retirement. And that, so it's not this love affair that I want to own a home. It's actually financially, in a financial planning aspect, if you continue to pay the high level of rent that we have in the UK, which are often similar to what a mortgage payment would be, when you suffer that reduction in income, which most people do suffer the reduction in income in their retirement, at least we've taken away your mortgage payment or your rental payment.
Yeah, no, you're right. And also, look, when you kind of raise these, when I raise these questions and issues, it's not that I'm kind of, I have a definitive answer on the issue. It's to kind of, again, with the intention of a provocation to get us to think more about some of these, well embedded narratives, these ingrained ideas about how lives ought to be led. It's interesting, and it's just come to the point you make in a minute, because I think it's the point of substance in this. I think, but for the retirement podcast at least, but it is. I think I don't remember the paper I cite in that section, but almost like about 2/3 of the happiness benefit that come from owning your home come from the comparison effect that you get with other people. So it's like there's a really significant comparison component to that, and if that narrative were to be recast, that it wasn't the kind of done thing or the expected thing or a sign of status that you owned your own home, then that effect would largely disappear. Yeah, and so your point about people in retirement owning their own homes is I think a really important one. I hadn't realized until the recent cost of living crisis and the interest rate hikes, and when they're talking about those numbers of people affected by mortgage rate increases, how many people actually own their homes outright? It's actually quite. It's a lot more people than I'd ever thought. So of course those people, many of whom will be retired, I guess, are benefiting from the from the fact that they bought their house. I just like to see, again, from a distributional perspective, like to see a better and more affordable social housing that people can have long-term rents where they have the security of being able to pay, like in Germany, 20-year rents and stuff and whatever, would be they're not mutually exclusive, I guess I'm saying. I mean, those two things can sit alongside one another.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there is some kind of unfairness around the fiscal policy over the generations, over the numerous governments that owning and buying property has been relatively tax benign. And therefore, where we tax corporations, tax small companies like mine, relatively heavily, we're at 25% corporation tax on an annual basis. If you go off and buy a property in, I don't know, Twickenham 5 years ago, and you've just sat there and you've just done a regular job and you've done, you paid your tax and all the rest of it, you have become substantially wealthy through no other endeavor than actually buying a property in the right road.
No, you're
and then if you'd have been in Newcastle and you'd have had the same regular job, let's say you've got a fireman and a nurse, and they just bought in the whatever in number 3 Acacia Avenue in Twickenham and 3 Acacia Avenue in Tynemouth, actually they both earned the same amount of money. They both contributed to society in the same way, but one couple has ended up substantially wealthier and added nothing more into the tax into the social world through no kind of endeavor of their own.
No, I completely agree. I think, if you think about also just on the generational point, and people have made this point elsewhere and others, that basically the last 3, 4, 5 decades of growth have largely been appropriated by older people. I mean, that's literally where nearly all of the gains from economic growth have gone, and particularly in asset prices and particularly in house prices. For, as you say, for things that are not really like effortful, you haven't sort of earned that income in any substantive way. And so I think where and I do speak to a few politicians of different political persuasions, and I think privately most of them recognise that it would be fair if people were paying more for their social care out of their asset price increases. It's like, I feel like that's completely reasonable to expect that of me, to be using that. But it's a very difficult political issue because the grey vote, the older vote is very powerful, and it's difficult in our current political system and climate to be doing things that are seen to be, hurting older people, as it were, financially. That's a very difficult political challenge.
So, Paul, my last question, really, let's imagine, and I know that you do this in your book quite often. You go, ask yourself a question, and then this is a position yourself in the advice that you give to a friend, in essence, or ask the friend the question. Now, you've already explained that you can continue working for as long as hopefully that you want to, and as much or little as you can. And now, lots of people won't have that, and lots of people they possibly may not have had such a fulfilling career as yourself. They've worked hard, but they haven't kind of gone to work every day loving it. And therefore, this idea of retirement is just like, what, I can't wait. I'm nearly there. It's ready to go. Now, my concept is that, if you get to 60, 65, you may have, we don't know, but you may have 20 to 30 years more life ahead of you. How would you advise that friend of yours to make sure that is as meaningful or fulfilling as it possibly could be?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. I mean, first of all, is that this is unprecedented. I mean, we've clearly never lived this long, and we've been adding, years of life. We don't know how to live to 90. It's not something that we've ever kind of had to sort of work out before. So we are kind of muddling our way through, right? I mean, that's bound to be the case anyway, both at an individual level and at a societal level. I think a couple of things come to mind. Is that often when you think about retirement, or say it's like, you ask me a question, would you like to live in San Francisco? Like kind of what I imagine is the first fortnight that I'm there, right? It's about as far as my mind can, look into the future. And going to San Francisco for a fortnight would be great, right? Retiring for a fortnight is great. It's what happens after. It's the months and the years that follow. If I lived in San Francisco, it would be all about the network of friends that I had. Really, actually, whether I enjoyed the company of other people, all the things that I would do day to day that make me happy. Of which I could say, if everybody listening listened to more music, went outdoors, helped other people, spent time that they like being with, and had new experiences. Those 5 things. If you did any one or more of those things a little bit more each day, you'd be happier. Now, they're really obvious things, right? Music, help other people, go outdoors, spend time with people you like being with, have new experiences. But we don't. They're not that obvious because we're not doing them anywhere near as often as we would if we were trying to be happier. Even listening to music, right? Just 10 minutes more a day, it not only elevates your mood in the time of the experience, but sometime thereafter as well. And that would be true whether I lived in San Francisco or Brighton, where I am now speaking to you from, or whether I retired. Right, so it's not the projection of the moment coming and the first fortnight, which is basically a holiday, but it's what you're doing day to day thereafter, and it's in these small things, right? I'm not like I'm saying things that are really obvious but overlooked. It's in the small stuff. It's not in the big grand things. Retirement is going to be this. Retirement is going to be 24 hours in the day. A third of them will be spent sleeping, or probably a bit less if you're older, right? So, and you're going to be, tired, and you're going to be, doing stuff and paying attention to the people that you're doing those things with. So in that substantive sense, it's not any different, but you do have opportunity with the time. Time is the scarcest resource that we all have, right? We're half an hour closer to death now, right? So like we won't ever get that time back. With money, you can beg, borrow, and steal. With time, it is the scarcest resource. So you have obviously less of it in terms of years when you retire, but maybe more of it on a day-to-day basis. It's about allocating that time in ways that bring you pleasure and purpose in the things that you do and the people that you're with. And so in that sense, it doesn't fundamentally change. Lots of things about your life change, but that the essence of what will make you happy day to day won't change whether you're working or retiring, though hopefully retirement will give you more time in order to do those things that bring you pleasure and purpose.
Yeah. Great.
Does that make sense? Was that?
It does. Yeah. No, yeah. It does. That does. It's wise words. Definitely wise words and good advice. So, Paul, I really appreciate you spending your time with me this morning in the heat of Brighton. Paul, where can people find more about you, the great work that you're doing, and of course your books?
Well, look, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do that. I would be told off if I didn't do that, and I always forget. I guess pauldolan.co.uk. That would be the place to go. That's perfect. That's where people can find anything and everything. And I'm shortly going to be releasing a sort of free. It's called 10 by 10 podcast series. It's called Get Happier, because the words Get Happier contain 10 letters. So I'm doing 10 minutes under each of the letters. It's probably about 90 minutes in total if you wanted to blast through them all. But they're going to be released sometime later this month or early next month. So hopefully people will listen to that.
Brilliant. Well, once again, thank you for your time. Really, really enjoyed chatting to you. I've really enjoyed consuming your books and listening to you on your podcast that you recorded. I think it's the Rabbit and
the Duck Rabbit podcast, and actually Rory's on the first handful of those as well. So
okay, great. Yeah. Well, I'm chatting to him next week, so I'll mention your name.
Yeah, I mean, just say I said something rude. That would. I can't think of anything on air.
Wonderful. Right. Well, thanks for your time. It's been great to get to know you, and good luck with the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, mate.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
A big thank you to Paul for taking the time out of his incredibly busy schedule to join me on the podcast. To find out more about Paul, buy one of his excellent books or register for his free upcoming course called Get Happier, check out the show notes to this episode wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with friends and family. And of course, if you're looking to create your own fulfilling retirement, you might like to take a look at my new book, which came out a couple of weeks ago. It's called the Retirement Café Handbook, 9 accelerators for a successful retirement, and is inspired by the dozens of podcast interviews I've had the privilege of having over almost 5 years. Plus, of course, my 30 years of helping people to retire successfully. Head over to Amazon to buy your copy or check out the show notes for a link. So, until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.